she stood alone in the desert, beside $1 million car and a pride cracking at the seams. No more power, no more title, only the sound of wind and a blown tire. And then a young man appeared. Worn-out t-shirt, frayed shoes, eyes unafraid of the world. He didn't ask who she was, didn't need to know. He just changed the tire, nodded, and walked away. But that quiet nod was what made her abandon an empire, withdraw all her capital, and build a small woodshop with him in a town that no one ever bothered to draw on a map. This isn't a fairy tale. This is real. And once you hear the whole story, you'll never dare to underestimate a calloused hand again. New Mexico, in June. Sun-burning heat, not a breeze. No cell service. On a stretch of highway between two towns 40 miles apart, Ava Morgan, former CEO of the tech giant Orion Edge, sat in a black Porsche Macan, its left rear tire as flat as her career 3 weeks ago. Dust clung to her sunglasses. Her linen dress faded under the sun. She had tried walking toward a gas station 8 kilometers away, but the scorching heat forced her back. Her Gucci shoes, soft brown leather, had torn at the heel. Her lips were dry. Her eyes squinted. She'd been sitting here for over 2 hours, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly small in this vast world. Ava wasn't used to waiting. For years, she only needed to command, and things would happen. A phone call, an email, a glance was enough to make others bow. But today, in the near 40 reals degree heat, and with nothing but withered cacti on the horizon, power meant nothing. Only silence, and the ache of being stranded felt real. As she was about to check her phone again, still showing 0 bars, the crunch of tires on gravel echoed from afar. A figure appeared, backlit by sunlight. The brightness blurred all detail, but the man's gait was unhurried, relaxed, like he was strolling through the desert for pleasure, not out of necessity. He stopped beside her car. A young man, early 20s. Tall, lean, yet solid. His sleeves rolled up to the elbows, his back soaked with sweat, a sun-darkened face. He gave a small nod and said, not a trace of politeness, "Looks like you've been here a while." Ava looked up, squinting harder. She leaned back slightly in her seat, not out of fear, but surprise. His face wasn't familiar, not unfamiliar, but it had a strange sincerity. "Long enough to start wanting to punch every cactus I see," she replied dryly, but with a faint smile. He laughed. A real laugh, not forced, not out of courtesy, just real. "Mind if I take a look?" Ava hesitated. She had learned not to trust easily, especially strangers. But here, in the middle of the desert, under the punishing sun and with hunger gnawing at her stomach, her only real choice was to trust. She nodded. The young man set his backpack down, pulling out an old, well-worn toolbox, neatly organized like it belonged to someone who'd done this for a lifetime. He pulled on gloves, crouched, and inspected the wheel. "You have a spare?" he asked. Ava pointed to the trunk. He opened it with smooth familiarity, like he'd done this 1,000 times. No more questions, no idle chatter. He got to work. Ava leaned against the car door, arms crossed, watching. Something about the way he moved kept her attention. Precise, calm, almost rhythmic, like he was playing a silent tune only he could hear. "You do this often?" she asked, curiosity breaking through. "Now and then. My uncle had a little repair shop up north. Before he passed, he taught me everything." Ava stayed silent. There was something in his voice, not mournful, not proud, just a truth from the past that still lived quietly within him. She began to notice the small things, the calluses on his fingers, the peace and distance in his eyes, and most of all, the silence he carried. Not awkward silence, but the kind that waits for you to have enough patience to understand it. A few minutes later, it was done. He stood, wiped his hands on his worn jeans. Ava cautiously pulled out her wallet and handed him a crisp $100 bill. "For your help." He stepped back slightly, raising a hand in refusal. "No need, ma'am. You don't want anything?" He smiled again, soft as desert wind. "I've got enough." She didn't know what to say. In front of her was someone the world would call ordinary. Yet he carried a calm and dignity she'd rarely seen among CEOs she'd worked with. He turned, strapped on his backpack, and pedaled slowly down the blazing road. Ava remained there, not because she wasn't ready to drive, but because for the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen. No business card, no title, no $1 million startup history. She called after him. "What's your name?" He turned and replied simply, "Malik? Malik Carter." Then disappeared around the bend, leaving her, and something quietly stirring in her chest that she couldn't yet name. 3 weeks earlier, Ava Morgan stood in the boardroom on the 38th floor, a floor once named after her, and watched as every person in the room turned their backs. The same people who once called her a strategic genius now couldn't meet her eyes as they voted her out as CEO. They called it a reasonable transition in the press release. But she knew it was betrayal, calculated down to the wording. Ava didn't cry when she signed the handover papers. She only asked one question. Who initiated this closed meeting? No one answered. Not even Rachel, her best friend since the company's early days, who looked down at the floor. That day, Ava didn't return to her downtown penthouse. She got in her car, drove west, and ended up at her family's old retreat house on the outskirts of Red Hollow, a small town never featured on any growth map. 3 weeks passed. She lived in complete silence. No schedules, no event invites. Her phone stayed quiet, except for a few polite check-ins from her former assistant and some thank you for your service emails from the board. None of it mattered anymore. She couldn't sleep. Some nights, she sat on the porch till 3 a.m., staring into the forest darkness, trying to find an answer to a question she couldn't name. What struck her as odd was that she didn't miss the company. She didn't miss the strategy meetings, the pitch decks, or the applause after every television appearance. But she did miss one strange thing. The way Malik looked her in the eyes. No evasion, no judgment, no agenda. Just looking. At first, Ava laughed at herself. Who obsesses over a man they met once in the desert? But the thought dug in, like a splinter she couldn't remove. Maybe it was the contrast. He, who had nothing, was calmer than she, who once had everything. Maybe it was that he never asked who she was. One late afternoon, Ava opened her laptop for the first time since leaving the city. She typed Red Hollow into Google. The signal was weak. It took time to load. But eventually, she found a few sparse lines. A town of just over 3,000 people, living mostly on farming and handicrafts. She zoomed in on satellite view, examined each street corner, each rooftop, and wondered if he lived somewhere there. Then she saw it, a small auto repair shop a few miles outside town. The blurry sign read, Carter's Auto Repairs. Carter, his last name. Her heart stirred. Not a youthful flutter, not attraction, but something deeper. Like her soul, torn by deals and betrayal, had recognized a missing piece. The next day, she didn't brush her hair, didn't put on makeup. She wore a plain white shirt, jeans, and got in the car. No map, no plan, just driving, guided by instinct, by the hazy memory of the road where he'd helped her. Along the way, she stayed quiet. The scenery shifted from city to dry hills, faded billboards, rare gas stations, tiny wooden houses tucked behind trees. Red Hollow appeared like a forgotten memory, unpretentious, undisturbed. Ava drove slowly through the neighborhood. She scanned each porch, each worker wiping sweat from their brow, each barefoot child darting across the road. And then she stopped. On a rickety wooden ladder in front of an old house, someone was repairing the roof. The hammering echoed in the dry air. She recognized that frame from behind, the sun-darkened arms. The movements, neither rushed nor lazy, just precise and steady. Malik. Her heart raced. She didn't know why. She turned off the engine, stepped out, and stood quietly under the shade of a roadside tree, watching. An elderly woman under the porch, perhaps the homeowner, looked up and called, "You've got a visitor, Malik." He turned. Eyes met eyes. He froze, surprised but not guarded. Just a silence that lingered a bit longer than normal. Ava smiled, hesitantly. "I just happened to be passing by." It was a lie. Both knew it, but neither called it out. He climbed down, sunlight filtering through the trees, casting golden shadows on his shirt. Sunday-worn face, eyes squinting in the light. But Ava saw what she'd seen before. Sincerity that needed no justification. "Your tire holding up?" he asked. "It is. But there's one thing I never got to do properly. Thank you. Huh? Malik nodded, but there was something in his eyes, as if he were asking, "Why did you come back?" She couldn't answer. She was asking herself the same thing. All she knew was, some things can't be explained by logic. Only felt and followed. Like the way she was looking at him now, as if in this vast world she had lost her direction and was tracing her way back by returning to where that first look once lingered a little longer than expected. Ava sat in her car, silent, hands resting on the wheel, though the engine had long been turned off. In front of her stood a faded wooden house, its porch weathered by time, with Malik patiently repairing the planks one by one. She watched him from the driver's seat, her heart beating slower than usual, not out of fear, but from a feeling she couldn't quite name, awkwardness and gratitude at the same time. She stepped out, and for the first time in her life, found herself unsure how to start a conversation. In meetings, Ava had once maneuvered million-dollar deals with a single phrase. But in front of Malik, she had no pitch, no strategy, just raw sincerity. Malik was standing on the ladder when the old woman beneath him called out, "You've got a visitor, Malik." He glanced back, eyes meeting Ava's. A breeze swept across the empty street, carrying the scent of freshly cut wood and something faint, like a reunion from a past life. He paused for a second, not showing much emotion, just squinting slightly against the sun. "Miss Morgan?" "Call me Ava," she said a bit awkwardly. "I was just passing by. This road felt familiar." "Really?" he asked, as if testing her. Ava nodded. Half a lie, but also half true. She really did miss this road, the one place where, for the first time in years, her name didn't define her. Malik climbed down the ladder, wiping his hands with the rag tucked at his waist. The sunlight highlighted the calluses on his fingers and the deep brown of his eyes, deeper than a forgotten well. "Your tire holding up?" "It is. But I never properly thanked you." He didn't reply, just stood there. The breeze lightly tangled her hair. No discomfort, no polite smile, just a present silence between them. "You do this kind of work often?" she asked, glancing toward the roof. Malik looked up, then back at her. "From time to time. The lady here lives alone. Needed a few things fixed. I'm not very good at saying no." Ava laughed light and genuine. Not the kind she used at networking events, but the laugh of someone realizing that some things are so simple they need no explanation. "Still driving a Porsche?" he teased. "I brought a spare in case you want to inspect it," she replied, a hint of humor in her voice. Malik raised an eyebrow, half amused, half intrigued. She didn't resemble the wealthy people he'd met before. She didn't carry arrogance, nor did she try to seem humble. Ava was simply Avalost, but not without courage. The old woman smiled from the porch. "Why don't you two come in for some iced tea? It's too hot to be out long." Malik shook his head and turned to Ava. "You like coffee?" Ava looked surprised, then nodded. "As long as it's not $7 a cup," she joked. Malik laughed for the first time, fully a complete laugh that lit up like a small lamp in a dark room. "There's a coffee place in town, squeezed between a pawn shop and a closed video store. Not pretty, but the coffee's not bad. Lead the way," Ava said without hesitation. The Cafe Hollow Grounds was the kind of place you'd never find on Yelp. The air smelled like fries, a ceiling fan spun lazily like a scene from an old movie, and every table bore the marks of time. Malik led her inside, and the entire cafe looked up not at him, but at her. Ava Morganonce, on the cover of Forbes, sat on a cracked red plastic chair, ordering black coffee, no sugar. Malik said nothing, just pulled out a chair opposite her, eyes observant but never judging. She knew she was the outsider here. But with him, there was no need to play a role. "You sure you want to be here? What about you? Do you come here often?" "Now and then. I come when I want to remember who I am. And now? Now, I'm wondering why you're here." Ava went quiet for a moment. The coffee arrived. She took a sip, winced. It was bitter, hot, real. Not what she was used to, but not unpleasant. "Maybe I just wanted to sit with the first person who didn't look at me like someone who's fallen off the throne." Malik paused, not because he was surprised, but because he knew that feeling all too well. "People think that once you lose a title, you lose your worth," Ava said, staring out the window. "But the truth is, I just lost my voice, and I hate the silence that gets forced on you." Malik looked at her for a long moment, then said softly but clearly, "Your voice doesn't come from a title. It comes from how you live after losing everything." His words dropped into her like a stone thrown into a still lake. The ripples spread deep, strong, and true. Ava had never heard anything quite like that, especially not from someone without a suit, a leather chair, or a single share in anything. And in that silence, they both sipped their coffee notes, speaking further. But in their eyes, the conversation continued, on a deeper level, where the most important things need no words. Wind slipped through the cracked windows of hollow grounds, bringing with it the scent of rotting wood and exhaust from the main road. Ava leaned lightly against the torn leather seat, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. The coffee in front of her had grown cold, but she didn't care. Her eyes were following the tiny beads of sweat still clinging to Malik's neck, something so real in a world full of masks. "How long have you been here?" she asked quietly. "All my life," Malik replied. "Born in Red Hollow. Grew up here. Never left the state." "Never left?" "Never had a reason strong enough to." Ava looked at him intrigued. "Don't you feel confined?" "Confined is living somewhere where everyone looks at you, but no one really sees you." His words stopped her cold, as if someone had just uncovered the very fear she couldn't name. "So do people see you here?" Malik smiled faintly, offering no answer. His gaze turned to the window, where a child struggled to pedal a brakeless bike, laughing freely. A man stepped out of the appliance repair shop, waving. That simple, peaceful scene felt like a reminder of something she once had, or once dreamed of, but never truly touched. "What about you?" Malik asked, still watching the street. "Did people ever really see you? Or just your title?" Ava was silent, not because she didn't have an answer, but because it was too obvious. They saw the brand, the name, the interviews. But no one ever asked me if I was okay. Malik nodded, as if he knew that too well. Then he said, barely above a whisper, "You're not okay." Ava laughed, not sarcastically, but almost in relief. "No, I'm not. But you're still here. Because of you," she blurted out, then stopped herself. Malik looked at her for the first time without looking away. He tilted his head slightly, as if studying a scar neither of them knew had been there all along. "Because you refused the money. Because you didn't ask who I was. Because the way you looked at me made me feel like I didn't have to prove anything." Silence fell between them, thick as cigarette smoke, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that belongs to people who've been hurt and are learning to let someone in, even just a little. Ava opened her bag, pulling out a leather-bound notebook, worn with frayed corners. She placed it on the table and pushed it toward him. "This is the real reason I came back." Malik raised an eyebrow, touching the cover but not opening it. "What is it?" "An idea, a sketch, of a space. Call it a community, a workshop, whatever. A place that teaches, trades, skills, gives young people a chance, people like you." "And you?" "Me?" Ava chuckled, her eyes lighting up for the first time since she entered the cafe. "I want to build something with no logo, no investors, no media, just real people and real value." Malik opened the notebook. Rough sketches appeared. Workbenches, a skills training area, a bulletin board on the wall, a small meeting room with glass windows overlooking a playground. Even a community coffee corner where people could sit down, talk, learn to fix something, or fix themselves. He flipped through the pages, said nothing, but his eyes shifted from skeptical to surprised, then from surprised to focused. "You drew these? I'm not good at drawing, but I know what I want." Malik closed the notebook, rested his hand on it as if weighing it not its physical weight. "But something deeper. You don't even know who I am. I know more than the people who invested millions in me. Because I saw you where no one forced you to be kind, you still chose to be." Malik took a long breath, leaned back in his seat, looked her in the eye. "I'm not sure I'm the right person. I'm not sure I deserve to build it." They looked at each other. No one backed down. No one postured. Just one truth lay between them, the notebook, and something in the air said, this was the beginning of something irreversible. Finally, Malik gave a quiet nod, almost inaudible. "Let's see where this road takes us." The next morning, Malik woke up early as always. He had breakfast with a cheap bowl of cereal in the small kitchen with chipped tiles, then biked to the woodworking shop where he worked part-time helping an old family friend. Normally, mornings like this were nothing special, but today In his backpack was a leather-bound notebook, and in his mind a woman from a world he'd never dared to step into. Ava Morganthy, former CEO, a tech icon once admired nationwide, had sat with him on a cracked plastic chair in a cafe without Wi-Fi and handed him an opportunity that felt either insane or destined. All morning, Malik couldn't focus. His saw cuts were off, his nails crooked. His friend Ruben frowned. "What's wrong with you? Somebody hit your nerve system or something?" Malik didn't answer, just shook his head. But in his mind, questions flooded. Was she serious? Was this just a rich person's boredom? Or did she actually see something in him? That afternoon, as he biked home, Ava was already waiting on the empty lot beside the shop. She wore a white button-down shirt, jeans, her hair tied high. No sunglasses, no designer shoes. She looked ordinary, but her eyes were not. Those eyes were the same as the first time they met, bright, but tired. Strong, but carrying something newly lost. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Not exactly." "Then let's walk." They walked along the forest edge, where a nearly 1-acre field lay abandoned, waist-high in grass. Ava said, "I leased this land, practically gave it away. Everyone thinks it's useless." "And what do you see?" Malik asked. "I see a wood shop, a training room, a corner where young people can learn to fix bikes, desk lamps, or maybe even patch up fractured confidence. You want to start here?" "Number?" Ava turned to look at him, serious. "I want to start with us." For the first time, Malik felt his heart skip a beat. Ava continued, not rushing, not dressing it up. "I can't promise. It'll be easy. I'm no good outside the boardroom, but I believe this is worth it." Malik stayed silent. A breeze rustled the dry grass like a soft round of applause from nature. He looked down at the ground beneath his feet, thinking of his mother who died of illness when he was 12, of his father who walked away, of his grandmother who once told him, "If you can't trust anyone else, try trusting your own hands." Ava pulled out a rough draft of a blueprint hand-drawn, messy, but clear. She laid it out on the ground. Malik sat beside her. Both of them brushed dirt aside with their hands, neither caring about the dust on their clothes. "This is the main training area," Ava pointed. "Here's the greenhouse. In the back, solar-powered restrooms. I'm working with a group of young engineers, but I need you for the build. I've never built anything this big, and I've never failed as hard as I did before. But maybe we're both standing in front of something brand new." That lint-simple but left Malik wordless. He just sat there, staring at the ground, then at the blueprint. It had been a long time since someone had asked for his input, not to exploit it, but to create something real together. He whispered, "Aren't you afraid?" "Afraid of what?" "That no one will support it. That people will laugh. That they'll say you lost your mind after losing your CEO seat." Ava looked up, her eyes steady. "I lost everything that used to earn me respect. Now I want to do something I can actually respect myself for." Silence fell again, but this time it was a silence of agreement, not hesitation. Malik slowly nodded, then said, "Okay, I'll help, but I have one condition." Ava squinted. "What condition?" "You don't get to apologize for believing in this, even if it fails." Ava smiled, a radiant yet trembling smile. She held out her hand. "Deal?" Malik shook it. His hand was rough, calloused. But in that grip was something she'd missed her whole career: genuine partnership. The sun leaned westward. On that barren patch of land, with no foundation or concrete, two broken people had just laid the first brick of something called a second chance. 2 weeks later, the invitation arrived. A tech fundraiser was being held at Hillview Mansiona Place that used to be Ava's familiar turf. The guest list included former CEOs, investors, major media, and those who had once stood beside her before turning away. Ava hesitated as she opened the envelope. She knew this wasn't an invitation. It was a reminder that they were watching to see whether, after the fall, she still existed. And this time, she wouldn't go alone. "You don't have to come," Ava told Malik one evening as they reviewed updated blueprints for the shop. "I know these parties aren't made for people like you." Malik raised an eyebrow, tilting his head slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" I mean, they might be. Judgmental." He nodded slowly, his gaze dimming, then asked, "So why do you want me there?" She looked him straight in the eye. "I don't want to go alone. I don't want them to think I'm crawling back for a second chance. I want them to see I've found something more real." After a pause, Malik said quietly, "Then I'll go. But I'm not promising to talk to anyone." That evening, Ava wore a classic black gown knot. Flashy, but just enough to remind people she used to own the room. Malik wore a dark button-down the first time in years. He wore something that didn't have sawdust on the sleeves. He stood in front of the mirror, fumbling with his cuff buttons. Ava stepped over and gently fixed them. "You look fine," she said. "I feel like I don't belong," Malik replied, candid as ever. "Trust me, I don't either." They arrived at the Manchona towering white estate, where every handshake was a power play. Soft jazz played. Crystal glasses clinked. The guests were sharp-dressed, their glances as sharp as razors. When Ava entered, every eye turned. There was curiosity, wariness, even some well-hidden mockery beneath polite smiles. Malik walked beside her quietly, his shoulders stiff, but his gaze calm. He didn't hold eye contact too long, didn't force a smile. He simply existed like someone who didn't need permission to walk into the room. An older man approached an early investor in Orion Edge. "Ava," he said, lips tight like he'd just tasted underaged wine. "We thought you'd stopped attending these." "I'm back," she said lightly, "but not for the same reasons." His eyes darted toward Malik, then back to her. "And you brought company?" "This is Malik Carter," Ava said clearly. "We're working on a project together." "What kind of project?" "A vocational training center in Red Hollow." "Ah," he sipped his wine. "Sounds noble." No compliment, no handshake, just a raised eyebrow, a punctuation mark that said, "You've drifted too far from this world." Malik stepped aside, letting Ava float into conversations he didn't belong to. He wandered over to the buffet table, picked up a piece of expensive-looking meat he couldn't name. He looked around. Everyone seemed to be acting. The generous investor, the compassionate leader, the old friend. No one real. No one looked at him like a person. A voice beside him. "Not from around here, are you?" Malik turned. A young man in a charcoal suit holding a wine glass smiled insincerely. "Excuse me? Just talking. Ava has a reputation for collecting strays. She has a big heart, but sometimes forgets the world isn't built on kindness." Malik's eyes darkened, but he didn't react not like he used to. He knew these weren't the first words of their kind and wouldn't be the last. "She likes rescuing people. She once invested in a startup and hate a massive flop. Now it's you." Before Malik could respond, a voice cut in. "Is there a problem?" Ava stood behind them, eyes sharp. The man raised his hands. "No, just chatting." "Then find someone else to chat with," she snapped. No smile. Her voice was clear, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. The man walked off. Malik looked at her, both grateful and slightly rattled. "Thanks. I should have done more than that." Malik stepped out to the back patio, where the music faded. The night sky stretched wide, stars glimmering ignored by the crowd inside. Ava followed a moment later. "You don't have to put up with this," she said softly. "I'm not mad they see me as a joke. I'm mad you didn't see that coming." Ava was still. "I thought I was ready." You were hoping I'd be able to take it." He looked her in the eye for the first time. There wasn't just sadness there. There was disappointment. "You're right," she admitted. "I didn't think they'd be that cruel. I wanted to show them something good. You wanted them to see you still had value, and you used me to prove it." "I didn't mean to," she said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted them to see I'd chosen something real." Malik turned away. The wind carried the scent of wine and roses cut from the root. "Next time," he said, "don't bring me to prove anything. I'm not an argument." She nodded, didn't argue. For the first time, Ava understood. Kindness has limits, and trust, if misplaced, becomes a burden. The next morning, Malik didn't show up at the project site as usual. Ava waited for over an hour inside the old pickup truck she had rented from a local in town, her first time ever waiting patiently for someone without knowing if they'd come. Eventually, she realized, today, Malik was avoiding her, and he had every right to. She turned the truck around and drove into the center of Red Hollow. On her way, she passed Carter's auto repair shop, stopping instinctively. But the shop was closed, lights off. Only the old wooden sign swinging in the wind, its faded letters barely legible. "We don't just fix cars, we rebuild trust." The slogan made her stop in her tracks. Something tightened in her chest. Not quite sadness, not quite regret. but a kind of pain that came from truth. She had broken the trust Malik placed in Heron, a quiet, wordless way, deep as a wound beneath a designer coat. Ava kept driving, past narrow streets and porches littered with dry leaves, and then she heard the buzz of a saw. It came from behind an old woodworking shed where Malik had once told her he worked part-time. She stopped, got out, unsure what she intended to do, but her feet carried her forward step by step, as if the scent of freshly cut wood were pulling her toward him. Malik was bent over, cutting planks for the frame of a large table. He wore a white t-shirt, soaked in sweat and sawdust, his face tilted under the sun. No headphones, no music, just the sound of the blade slicing through wood, and his steady breathing as if nothing else in the world existed. Ava stood outside the fence, hands resting on the rail. She didn't call out, just watched him as if this were the first time she truly saw him, not obscured by city lights, fame, or class. When he looked up and saw her, his gaze wasn't cold but clear. He wasn't surprised, as if he knew she'd come. He just hadn't decided what to say yet. Ava opened the gate and stepped in. "I just want to say one thing," she began, voice hoarse with nerves. Malik wiped his hands and leaned against the workbench. "And what's that?" She swallowed. No speech, no polished words, just the truth. "I'm sorry." He didn't respond, just looked, waiting for more. "Not just for last night, but for putting you in that situation without asking first. I thought if they saw me with someone decent, they'd see me differently. But I was wrong. They didn't deserve to see you, and I shouldn't have used you to prove anything." Malik remained silent, but something softened in the air around him. "I'm used to being seen with admiration, so when I lost that, I tried to make up for it with anything, even with the person I respect most." He stepped forward, closer, not touching, but close enough for her to feel the weight of his presence. "You think I'm that fragile? Number, I think you've been misjudged too many times, and I didn't want to be one more person who got you wrong." Malik exhaled, looking around the workshop, the scent of new oak, sawdust dancing in morning light. "You know," he said, "when I was a kid, every time someone laughed at me for being poor, for my dark skin, for my dad leaving, I'd go home and tell my grandma. She never comforted me. She just said, 'If they don't know who you are, why believe what they think of you?'" Ava laughed, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Your grandma was wise. She used to say, 'Honor isn't what you bring to a party. It's what you still have when you leave.'" Malik stepped even closer, gently. "You haven't lost me, but if you want to rebuild this, it won't be with an apology. It'll be with action." Ava nodded. "Then let me. Not to erase what happened, but to build something new from scratch, without needing any spotlight." Malik looked at her, longer than usual, then handed her a plank of wood. "Take this. We've still got a workshop to build. And next time you're swinging the hammer, deal." Ava smiled, eyes shimmering. "Deal." Malik nodded, then turned back to the saw as if the conversation had never interrupted the rhythm of his work. But in the air, something had shifted, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet truth. From that moment on, every nail they drove wasn't just for the building, but for rebuilding the trust between two people the world had once broken. 3 days after that conversation in the woodworking shop, the first truckload of materials rolled onto the plot at the edge of Red Hollow. It was a patch of dry land, choked with weeds, once mockingly called the future landfill by locals. But to Ava, this place was the beginning, a kind of foundation no one wanted and no one believed in. Malik stood in the middle of the lot, hands on hips, squinting under the sun. Sweat ran down his back. He glanced over at Ava, who was clumsily helping 3 local teenagers clear a pile of old bricks in the corner. "You sure about this design?" he called. Ava, bunting, looked up. "Sure, temporarily, until you redraw it again. You wired everything backward. That's why I need you." The line, casual as it was, made Malik chuckle. He was getting used to the way Ava no longer tried to prove herself, but allowed herself to be corrected when needed. The early days were grueling. Digging, marking foundations, erecting scaffolding. Malik worked like there was no tomorrow. Ava tried to keep up learning to hold a hammer, mix cement, measure walls. Every afternoon they sat on the makeshift stoop, drinking cold water and planning the next day. Word spread quickly. Town gossip buzzed. "Ava Morgantha, woman who was once on magazine covers, now shoveling sand." Some laughed. Some piqued in curiosity. There were skeptical stares, even pity, but no one expected she stayed. One morning, as Malik was adjusting steel beams, Ava called out, "Someone wants to meet you." "Who?" "Chris Delano, freelance journalist. Used to write for Wired. Heard about the project. Wants an interview." Malik tightened his mask, shook his head. "Number, I'm not doing this for press." "I know. I didn't invite him. He found us. And if I say no, I'll speak instead, but it won't sound like you. You still want them to see us?" Ava looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Number, I want the people who used to be like us to see they can do this too." That answer didn't bring an immediate reaction. Malik just nodded slowly. "Then make sure they don't only see you." "You're right," Ava exhaled. "This time, the spotlight has to shine on Bother, not at all." And so the days passed. The first brick walls went up. Wooden frames took shape. They called it the Workshop of Life, a name coined by a 15-year-old volunteer. Malik didn't like it at first, said it sounded like a corny slogan. But Ava laughed, because it's true. That's exactly what we're doing. One evening, as the sun dipped blood-red behind the mountains, Malik sat on the unfinished concrete steps, staring at the dusty road. Ava handed him a water bottle and a revised layout. "I just redrew the woodshop area. Take a look." Malik studied the paper, then looked at her. "You didn't reverse the wiring this time?" "Number. But I forgot the fire exit." "That's fine, as long as there's a space inside worth staying for." Ava looked up, startled. Malik didn't meet her eyes, but the slight smile on his face betrayed the stoic shell. She understood. Though no one had said it, yet something had begun. No declaration, no definition, just one brick at a time, together. News of the project spread. Some online sites ran headlines like, "Former CEO builds woodshop in the desert." Under the articles came hundreds of comment sprays, criticism, disbelief. Ava didn't respond. She no longer feared being misunderstood. For the first time, she wasn't doing it for approval. And Malaconse, convinced he was born to live quietly now, stood in the middle of an unfinished building, showing teenagers how to balance a hammer. He no longer lowered his gaze when people stared at his calloused hands. Instead, he pointed to the scaffold and grinned at a brown-skinned girl who misfired a nail. "A little crooked's okay, as long as it's strong enough to hold what you believe in." They no longer needed the approval of those who once turned away. They were building a new world, not from concrete or steel but from people once pushed to the margins. Denver, Colorado, late September. The sky was clear. The sunlight no longer as harsh as summer, but bright enough to make the Civic Center's glass facade reflect like a giant mirror of ambition and illusion. Ava Morgan stood behind the curtain, her hand tightly clutching a folded speech. Outside, hundreds of people sat waiting for the woman who had once been the face of the startup generation, now returning after a long and suspicious hiatus. On social media, the tech world had already branded her either the forgotten icon or the stylish symbol of failure. She knew they weren't waiting to hear her. They were waiting to judge her. But Ava hadn't come to reclaim anything. Malik sat in the last row, wearing a dark blazer borrowed from Rubin & shoes that didn't match the outfit. His fingers were laced together tightly. He had never stepped into a space like this, where people spoke in slides, looked at one another through valuation sheets, and shook hands without touching hearts. When the host announced, "Please welcome Ava Morgan, founder of Elevate Tech, former CEO of Carrington Green," the applause echoed, polite, not warm, not hostile, just the kind of applause that said, "Impress me." Ava walked on stage. The spotlight hit her face, almost blinding, but she didn't blink. She didn't scan the audience. She looked toward where she knew Malik was, even if she couldn't see him clearly. She took a breath, set the paper down. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "Today, I'm not here to talk about market share. I'm not here to talk about IPOs or valuation metrics. I'm here to talk about what happens when you lose yourself." A ripple of silence spread through the room. A few exchanged glances. A few phones were lifted discreetly. "I used to be one of you. Every decision I made was tied to one goal: growth, positioning, admiration. I built a company, and I also lost it." She paused. Her voice dipped, but her eyes stayed locked on the crowd. 3 months ago, I met someone in the desert. My car had a flat tire. I thought it was just a minor inconvenience, but it turned out to be the moment that changed my life." Behind her, the LED screen displayed an Imaginaut, a chart, Not a logo, but a photo of a small wood shop where a man was teaching a child how to frame wood. That man, Malik Carteris, not an engineer, not an investor. He doesn't have a LinkedIn profile, but he has something many people in this room have lost: integrity. A murmur started among the seats. Cameras zoomed in on her face. Ava didn't flinch. They say I lost everything, but they're wrong. I found something success had hidden from me, a real reason to begin again. She inhaled deeply. Her lips trembled, but she spoke because, for the first time, she wasn't speaking to persuade. She was speaking to be free. I love him. The room went completely still. Not a cough, not a clap. Just silence as if every exit had vanished, and there was only her and the truth. If that means I lose investments, invitations, or the respect of the tech industry, then I accept. The screen behind her changed. A simple phrase appeared: love builds. No logo, no animation. Just 3 words like the first 3 bricks of a new world. Ava gave a slight nod and stepped down from the stage. No looking back, no waiting for applause. She had said what needed to be said. The rest didn't matter. Backstage, an assistant rushed over. "Ava, the media's going crazy. They want interviews now." "Let them wait. You don't understand. This'll be on every site in 10 minutes. Then at least they'll be posting something real." She walked down the marble corridor, removing her microphone. Her heels clicked softly against the stone floor. Malik stood at the end of the hall, still silent, still unsure whether to feel proud or afraid. She walked toward him. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know, but I wanted them to see. Not you, but the reason I chose you." Malik looked at her. For a long time, in his eyes, doubt was fading, replaced by something more fragile: trust. "You could lose everything," he repeated. Ava smiled. "Then let me lose it for a reason I chose." He said nothing, but his hand found hers. For the first time, no walls, no explanations, nothing left to prove, only the one thing that remained after everything else fell away: love and the truth. The internet exploded within hours of Ava Morgan's speech. From tech media to social platforms, the headlines spread like wildfire. Former CEO shocks audience by declaring love for carpenter at Denver summit. Ava Morgan admits to trading her career for love. Woman gives up millions to build a woodshop with a nobody. Behind the clickbait titles were thousands of comments due, many for Ava to count. Some criticized her for being emotional, weak. Some called Malik an opportunist riding on the feelings of a fallen woman. Former colleagues posted statements like, "We respect Ava's personal choices, but do not align with her current direction." Ava read them all, didn't deny, didn't reply. She knew when you speak the truth, the first thing you lose is the illusion that people will support you. And then, something no one expected began to happen. Her inbox started filling with letters not from investors, but from nameless people. A teacher from Nebraska told the story of a student expelled for being poor, but who could fix radios. A single mother from Texas said she hoped her son would grow up to be like Malik, someone who lived by his hands and his conscience. A 12-year-old girl from Detroit wrote with messy ink, "My brother said girls can't study mechanics, but you stood up there and now I know I can." Ava printed that letter, folded it carefully, and tucked it into her wallet right next to her old business card, which she no longer used. Malik was different. He didn't read the news, didn't check the internet, but he felt the shift in how people looked at him as he worked at the construction site. They pointed. Some showed pity. Some offered interviews. Some oddly began to drop off materials: cans of paint, spare wood, sometimes even a loaf of warm bread. He said to Ava, "You know what's funny? They used to look right through me. But the moment you said you loved me, I became visible." Ava smiled gently. Maybe love clarifies the shape of a person. Malik thought for a moment. Numbered not love. The courage not to hide it. They fell silent, the air no longer tense. Calm as if in the center of a storm they'd found a quiet room to sit in together. A week later, they sat on the back steps of the still unfinished workshop, now with walls, a roof, and the first warm light bulb glowing faintly overhead. Before them, an open field. The wind steady. The late autumn sky glowing like an oil painting. Ava rested her laptop on her lap, about to check email, But Malik stopped her. Do you really need to read that now? Just want to check. News doesn't change reality. She paused, closed the lid. You're right. Malik took her hand, calloused, but gentle. I used to think maybe I was born to live at the edge of other people's lives. To lay the foundation, build their houses, fix their things, but never live inside the home I helped create. Ava looked at him, eyes dimming. And now? Now I know I don't need to live in someone else's house, because I'm building my own with the person who stayed. She rested her head on his shoulder. The wind brushed her hair. We'll be attacked again, she whispered. They'll say this is a PR stunt, that I'm using you, or you're using me. Let them talk, Malik replied. But when the tree grows, no one asks where the seed came from. They just know it's real. That night, when Ava got home, she opened the mailbox, not email, but real letters. One stood out written neatly in purple ink. I don't know how to hammer nails, but I know how to tell stories. If you ever need someone to share your workshop story so people can understand, I'm here. Signed, Sophie, 14 years old, Kansas. Ava folded the letter, smiling to herself. She no longer held power, no longer rode in gleaming cars, no longer sat at mahogany conference tables. But she had found something that success had once stolen from her: meaning and humanity. A crisp autumn morning, 1 year since Ava Morgan stood on the stage in Denver and did the unthinkable. The sky over Red Hollow was a perfect, untarnished blue, like it hadn't changed since the first brick was laid on the forgotten plot of land. But now, the place once mocked as future landfill had become a real home. A wooden sign hung above the gate, the letters freshly carved and clear. Brooks and Morgan Institute. Skills, dignity, future. A brightly lit woodshop. A greenhouse out back, filled with thriving vegetables. A classroom with a whiteboard and wooden chairs, hand-built. And in the middle of it, allifater. Hammering. Teaching. The voices of young people who had once been cast aside, now reclaiming their space. Malik stood before a group of trainees, men and women of every color and background. One wore headphones, another had tattoos covering both arms, another was a single mother holding a toddler on her hip. Malik placed a block of oak on the bench. Cut with the grain. Don't force it. Don't rush. Let the wood show your hands the way. A Navajo boy raised his hand. What if the cut goes wrong? Malik smiled. Then fix it. Nothing's a permanent mistake unless you give up. Every word wasn't theory. It was lived truth drawn from years of quiet rejection, from hands once deemed useless in the world of spreadsheets and pitches. At the far end of the shop, Ava was hosting a group of visitors, teachers, local business owners, even a small-town mayor from nearby. No one asked her about Carrington Green anymore. No one called her CEO. Now they just called her Ava, and she had never felt lighter. She wore a blue shirt, white canvas shoes streaked with dirt. Her hair was tied back simply, her face sun-kissed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, more interview requests, funding offers, book deals. But as with every day lately, she ignored them. One trainee approached and handed her a hot cup of coffee. Ava nodded in thanks. Miss Ava, the girl said, I went to an interview yesterday, and for the first time, someone looked at my hands and said, you have real skills. I didn't have to lie about anything. Ava held the girl's hand, still dusty with sawdust. That's what you always deserved. The world just needed a reminder. That afternoon, Malik and Ava sat together on the back steps of the main building, their favorite place to end each workday. The sun dipped low, washing the field in golden light, where kids screamed and ran wild in joy. Ava rested her head on Malik's shoulder and whispered, Do you remember what they used to say? That this was just an emotional stunt, that I was throwing away my career. I remember. Well, now, I've got none of what I used to. No, Malik interrupted, eyes on the horizon. Now you have more than anyone in that room ever had. Something real. Ava stayed silent. A sparrow landed on the fence nearby, chirped, and flew off again. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Regret what? Letting people know who you are. Letting me pull you out of your world. Malik looked at her, his gaze softening. Number? You didn't pull me out. You sat down and stayed. That night, when everyone had gone, Ava stayed to clean the classroom floor. Malik put away the tools. The amber lights glowed softly, reflecting on the polished concrete. From the workroom, Malik called her. Come here a second. She walked over. He handed her something wrapped in cloth. She opened it. Hand-carved wooden plaque. The words etched deep. Love builds. I made it before I even knew if you'd stay, Malik said. But now I think it's time we hang it. Ava ran her fingers over the letters, eyes misting. Where? Where everyone will see it when they walk in. So they'll know. This place wasn't built on capital. It was built on choice. Together, they mounted the sign above the entrance. As they stepped back to admire it, the lights caught the lettering just right, making it glow as if it were alive. There was no applause, no cameras, just wind whispering through the open door and the scent of fresh-cut wood. A quiet reminder that this journey was only just beginning. Opening day of Brooks and Morgan Institute. A cool Saturday morning. Flags fluttered in the breeze. Hot coffee poured steadily from a truck parked by the curb. Local pastries lined tray shumble, but warm and fragrant. Red Hollow showed up. Some came out of curiosity. Some came because they liked Malik. Some came because this was the biggest event the town had seen since the spring fair 7 years ago. But in the midst of it all, one thing stood out in unspoken warmth that didn't need a microphone. Rows of plastic chairs lined the courtyard. At the front stood a podium made of oak built by Malik and his students. No banners. Only 3 words carved on the wall behind it. Love builds futures. Malik wore a navy shirt, old jeans, worn brown shoes. His palms were slightly damp. Ava approached, straightened his collar, and whispered, "You don't need to be perfect. Just be real." Malik nodded. For the first time in his life, he had been invited to speak, not to give thanks, but to open something. When the MC said, "Please welcome co-founder Malik Carter for a few words," he stepped to the podium, paper in hand, then set it down. He looked out at the crowd faces, not unfamiliar, but who had never seen him like this. "Hi," he began, voice not loud but sure. "I'm not used to public speaking, and I'm no good with fancy words, but I know how to use a hammer, and I know when a foundation is solid." Gentle laughter rippled. Ava, standing behind him, smiled, her hand resting over her heart. "I used to think some people were born to stay on the sidelines, to hold doors, build frames, lay down floors for other people's worlds. But then, someone didn't hand me a ladder." She sat beside me and handed me a hammer. A quiet stir moved through the audience. Malik continued, "People ask me, why build a woodshop in a place no one looks at? Why teach nameless kids how to use saws and screws and sandpaper? And I say, because I used to be one of them." He paused. His gaze found the trainees. Jamal, the boy who'd dropped out in 10th grade, now holding a ruler like a junior engineer. Maria, the single mom of 2, now studying carpentry to rebuild her life. "I'm not here because I'm the best. I'm here because someone believed in the best part of me before I ever saw it myself." Ava clenched her hand. The crowd had fallen into a hush, no cameras clicking, no rustling chairs. This isn't just a workshop. It's a place for everyone who's ever been told they weren't good enough. You don't need a resume here, just heart. You'll learn how to build things again, including yourself. He stopped, then looked toward Avenant, naming her. But everyone knew. "We named it Brooks and Morgan, but it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the people sitting here, the ones still coming, the ones who haven't yet dared to believe they deserve a new start." And finally, he closed not with a rehearsed line, but a truth he had lived. Building something with love and easy, but it's the only thing that never collapses. The applause erupted not because Malik was eloquent, but because he was real. And in a world full of artificial shine, truth is the rarest gift. After the ceremony, while everyone mingled, took photos, exchanged contacts, Ava and Malik slipped away into the shop out of view. They stood before the main wooden wall, where the Institute's first photo hung, a shot from behind. Malik crouched beside a child, guiding her hand on a plane. Below the image, an inscription: "When someone gives you trust, don't ask why. Ask how you'll hold it." Ava touched the frame. "You held it," she said. Malik turned, taking her hand. "And you turned it into something that's never existed before?" Under the soft yellow lights of the shop, with sawdust in the air, the scent of fresh coffee, the distant echo of hammers, they said nothing more. They just stood side by side. No vows, no titles, because between them, everything had already been built, brick by brick, Afternoons in Red Hollow are unlike anywhere else. The wind is strong enough to stir the doors, but never slams them shut. The sunlight warms every rooftop without ever burning. And the laughter from the courtyard rises not loud, not attention-seeking, just enough so outsiders know something inside is being healed. Ava and Malik sat on the tailgate of an old pickup truck, the same one they used to haul their first lumber to the site. In front of them, a wide dirt yard where the kids were playing ring toss. Far off, a lone red maple stood tall, the symbol of this institute's only place on a map that once erased it. "How far do you think we'll go?" Ava asked, leaning back on her hands, eyes squinting into the sun. "As far as we want," Malik said. "As long as we don't go back to where we once didn't believe." "What do you mean?" "I mean," Malik tilted his head with a half smile, "we've already walked through fear, so nothing can really stop us anymore." Ava nodded. She knew he wasn't trying to comfort her. He was stating a fact. When two people have survived the worst the world can throw at the mockery, doubt, exclusion, then the rest is just a matter of time. Later, they were called into the meeting room, not for a meeting, but to read letters, real letters. Colorful ones, with stickers and drawings sent from across the country. From students in Chicago, a mother in Alabama, an old blacksmith in Oregon. Each letter shared a life story and how a small institute in Red Hollow made them feel seen. One letter stood out. It was from a juvenile detention center in Missouri. The writer, a 16-year-old boy named Lucas, awaiting trial for car theft. "I'm not asking to be let off, but I hope that if I ever get out, I can go to that shop so I can use my hands to build something that doesn't get locked up." Ava folded the letter and looked at Malik. Neither said a word, but both felt it. Their journey had gone farther than expected. Not in distance, but in depth. That night, they hosted a small dinner with their core group of trainees. Nothing fancy, just stir-fried noodles, grilled meat, and lemonade in glass jugs. Malik grilled. Ava set the table. No phones, no live stream. Every story shared was raw, unfiltered. Jamal told them about being kicked out of his house for making his mom cry. No. He sends her a picture of his breakfast at the workshop every morning. A silent apology. Maria spoke of the first time her daughter said, "Mom, you smell like wood," with pride in her eyes. And Malik for the first time talked about the father who walked out when he was 10. "He once told me, 'You'll never make anything with those rough hands.' Now every scar is part of this foundation." Ava sat quietly. She realized, from someone who once only knew how to manage, he was now surrounded by people who knew how to feel. And she wasn't the one who saved anyone. She just created the space for someone to walk in and grow strong. As the night wound down and everyone left, Malik and Ava cleaned up beneath the warm glow of the shop's lights. In Ava's hand was a new picture frame. It held a photo of the two of them, with the first completed wall in the background. Engraved on the frame, "Don't ask if it's worth it. Ask if you're brave enough." Malik took a hammer and nailed the frame to the center of the classroom wall, where every student would see it every single day. When he tapped in the final nail, the sound echoed clean, solid. Ava smiled. "You used to be afraid of that sound," she said. "And now?" "Now, it sounds like an answer." Malik turned to her. In the quiet light, they didn't need to say anything. Just hands touching. Hearts steady. Gratitude filling the air, not for having arrived, but for never turning back. In the end, it wasn't about who won. It wasn't about who was right. It wasn't about who became richer, more famous, or got the loudest applause. It was about who chose truth, who stayed when it would have been easier to leave, who built something lasting with the most fragile materials. Trust, kindness, love. Ava Morgana, name once synonymous with speed, power, and performance, was now simply a woman with sun-darkened hands and eyes that had learned to listen. She was no longer at the top, but was finally living a life the top could never buy. Malik Cartera Carpenter, with no degree, no resume, no prestigious background, was now the man who stood before crowds with a hammer in hand and an honesty that made people pause. Because here was someone who had once lost everything, but never lost himself. And the Brooks and Morgan Institute, it wasn't just a building. It was an idea, built from every almost quitting moment. From people who weren't perfect, but chose not to surrender. Every screw, every nail whispered the same thing. "I may not be like you, but I deserve a new beginning too. You're hearing this story not because it's extraordinary, but because it reminds you of something that once lived inside you, a project you were scared to start, a person you haven't dared to love, a dream you folded away long ago. So now, as this story ends, you can stay sitting, or you can stand up, pick up your own hammer, and start rebuilding, even if it begins with just one breath. Because the truth is, love builds. Always.